Hello and welcome to the Gaggle World Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, we've had occasion to comment on the strange proclivities of the British, who seem to be off their rocker these days, and they seem to have joined the Balts in just simply in raving insanely and demanding a war with Russia. It's very, very strange because the British, traditionally have been thought to be rather phlegmatic people, not given to outpourings of emotion and losing their temper unnecessarily. That they generally regarded as calm under pressure. There is
Well,
an
no,
expression.
it's the colonials that are very emotional. Yes.
Exactly, the stiff upper lip. That's what we always we knew the phrase, the stiff upper lip. You associated with the British, understatement. That's the traditional British style, but not anymore. So we have Keir Starmer, who is coming to Washington sometime this week, along with Emmanuel Macron. They're not going to be there at the same time, and both are going to try and persuade Trump to do something. It's not clear what exactly they want to do. They're not happy with Trump, but they're going to try and persuade him to do something. But in the meantime, we have these strange people in Britain who are calling for war with Russia. I mean, just flat out calling for war with
Yeah, our good friend Timothy Garton Ash,
well,
people
Timothy
like him.
Garton Ash, we've covered him. But on Times Radio the other day, the former number two Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, General Sir Richard Sheriff, he gave an interview. And I think it's worth just listening to this interview. Again, this isn't some nutcase on the street,
This
not some.
isn't like a Doctor Strangelove thing. I mean, his name is Sheriff.
It's
Okay, okay,
its name is Sheriff. But when you
okay.
look at him, he's very upper crust, very,
This is
very.
not the Onion.
It's not the Onion. No, no, no. So, yeah, so Richard Sheriff, he speaks with a very, very upper crust accent, very, very pleasant to listen to. He has that handsomeness that well-born and well-bred British have. And so it's worth just paying attention to what this Sir Richard Sheriff has to say.
I think the events of the last week have made the likelihood of war with Russia within the next 3 to 5 years much, much more likely.
Hello and welcome to Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Chabot. And today we are talking to the former Deputy Supreme Allied Commander Europe, General Sir Richard Sheriff. General Sheriff spent 37 years in the British Army. He's commanded troops on operations at every level and co-founded the global risk and advisory company Strategia Worldwide. He's also the author of War with Russia. General Sheriff, great to see you on Frontline again. Thank you for the time. Now, earlier this week, the focus was...
So this is a moneymaker for him, war with Russia.
US and Russia,
Yes,
which excluded Ukraine.
that's right.
It's been eclipsed by the war of words between President Trump and President Zelensky. Where does this leave Ukraine? Some say Donald Trump has changed sides.
Kate, firstly, thank you for having me back. It's always good to talk to you. Trump is parroting Putin's line, and one has to ask, what on earth has Putin got on Trump for the President of the United States to be frankly now in bed with an indicted war criminal who has committed the most appalling atrocities in Ukraine? And he looks to be throwing Ukraine under a bus. So I think this leaves Ukraine in a very difficult place unless, and this is the key thing, Europe and Canada step up to the mark really with resounding statements of support for Ukraine, which is happening. And indeed, our own Prime Minister President Zelensky yesterday. So that is happening, but it needs to be more than just statements of support. It needs to be a strategy from Europe and Canada that says, your peace talks are going nowhere. We are going to support you, Ukraine, in defeating Russia. Now that would be a hard ask.
And of course, our Prime Minister, the British Prime Minister, is off to Washington next week. It's a trick. You say he has supported Zelensky after President Trump called him a dictator. It's an extremely difficult diplomatic tightrope he has to walk.
A very difficult tightrope, but he would make it much easier for himself, our Prime Minister, if he went having issued a very strong statement that the British government is committed to increasing defence spending to at least 3% of GDP, and has now initiated a strategy design process. Now,
3% of GDP. Keir Starmer, Sir Keir, we should call him Sir Keir, has said, well, it will go up to 2.5% by 2030. That 2030.
He'll be out of government by then, so don't
exactly.
worry about
He'll be out of government by 2030. That's the plan. That's the plan he's going to Washington with. We're going to get it up to 2.5% by 2030. Well, I don't know if that's going to please Donald Trump, because Donald Trump says 5%, like now, and he's coming up with 2.5%. He wants 3%.
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, I think Trump, he's going to need to have the White House medical staff at these meetings, because he's going to try and say, does he have a hearing problem? I'm going to say 5%. And the doctor, did you hear me say 5%? Because the British Prime Minister, he can't hear 5. Okay, maybe you can examine him while we're in the Oval Office. He has a hearing problem.
That's right. That's right.
To get us there as quickly as possible. If he goes without anything substantive to offer Trump like that, I fear it'll be a fool's errand.
And it's all about the business deals, isn't it, with Donald Trump, the transactional president. I was just wondering a little bit about your perspective on how much this spat between President Zelensky and Donald Trump at the moment is about the fact that Zelensky rejected that deal on rare earths that Trump was offering, that proposed to Ukraine, which Zelensky basically said was no good. It's basically selling out his country, and it was all in the US's favor.
Well, will you stop it, George? Just stop. I mean, so only now in February 25, Zelensky's been selling out his country? Maybe I have a hearing problem now.
I absolutely agree. Because in any case, this agreement is just a bunch of numbers on a piece of paper. I mean, no one's doing anything. I mean, it's like it's not like anyone is actually putting any capital into anything.
Look, it would be the same level of seriousness would be, we found copper on the moon. Okay, do you want in on the concession?
Right, exactly. Sign
it's
here.
of equivalence. It's
right.
Absurd.
Yeah. That's why he's like, no, I'm not signing on to this. It's nothing. I mean, it's nothing. I mean, here's a piece of paper. Sometime someone's going to come in, make a geological survey, and then they're going to say, what's feasible, what's not feasible, how much capital is needed, how much money. I mean, it's going to take forever to work. Even if any of these plans come to fruition, it's going to take forever. All that you've been given is just a piece of paper, with a bunch of numbers on it.
And everyone, these rare earths, they're called rare. Why? Oh, because there isn't that much of it. Okay,
right.
It is a multi-billion-dollar endeavor. There are a handful of companies in the world that can actually do it at low margin, which they would have to partner with the state. A state could do it, but we're chasing unicorns here. Okay,
right.
This is absurd.
Right.
George, what's the writer's name over at the Guardian? Harding. What's his first name?
Oh, Luke Harding.
I think this is Luke Harding's father.
I'm serious. They all look a little alike. Yes.
They all look a little like, there's something about, anyway, I won't say.
Yeah. No. They do look alike. Absolutely. It's like this guy is almost from Central Casting. He reminds me of so many different people. There's just something about that look that he has.
It could well be, but it could equally be about, and Trump is a man who has a reputation for being vindictive and having a long memory. It could be about Zelensky's part in which Trump believes is there in do you remember the whole saga of his impeachment and and allegations of Biden.
He can't say Russiagate, can he?
That's it. That's right.
Details, but I think it could easily be about that as well.
There's a lot of form, isn't there, and bad vibe in the history of their relationship. When he went out, though, Trump, and called him a dictator who refuses to hold elections and says that he started the war, he could have stopped it, he's doing a terrible job. I know you say, I wonder what kind of compromat the Russians may have on him for him to go into what Zelensky has described as this kind
Here we
of
go again.
disinformation bubble, which
Here we go again.
President Trump. Is he saying these things, do you think, is it possible he's also saying them for his political base, or even he's trying to shape the negotiations and it's not necessarily what he says, but it's what he does?
Well, if he's trying to shape the negotiations, he's not going the right way about it, because he's giving Russia everything that Russia wants. And there's no surprise, as you may have listened to Steve Rosenberg on the radio this morning, that they could not be more delighted in Moscow. Every banner headline is absolutely thrilled, and Putin is no doubt rubbing his hands with glee and toasting Trump with vodka. I think there's.
Trump doesn't drink.
I just love this. Get every single cliche in. Oh, with vodka. I mean, they always do it. I mean, they can't think other than cliche. So I remember when they were talking about Milosevic back in the day, they was, he'd be drinking Slivovitz. Milosevic never touched Slivovitz, but well, of course, because he's a Serb. What would a Serb drink? Well, he drinks Slivovitz. So Milosevic is drinking Slivovitz.
Yeah, but this whole interview is a parody on itself.
Right. Exactly.
Because it is softball talking points, and the answers are talking points.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. This is Times Radio. So this is the Times, Rupert Murdoch's Times, and this journalist, not pushing back, just egging him on.
Egging him on.
Yeah.
Coming from here, Russia is not going to give up on its intent to destroy Ukraine as a state, or give up its intent to reduce the Ukrainian government to a puppet, Ukraine to a client state, and annex large chunks of eastern Ukraine and demilitarize it as well. And everything that Trump's...
Now, when he describes that, you think, and why is that a problem for you? I mean, let's say Russia intends to do all of that. Why is that a problem for you? Why is that a problem for the British people?
The foundational documents of the independent Ukraine in 1991 was to be neutrality, to make sure neither NATO or Russia would do this to Ukraine. Right. It was the Americans leading the charge, swept that away and made Ukraine a battleground. Okay, right. The caveat here is that Zelensky said, "Okay, let's go."
That's exactly right. And Ukraine knew what he was doing when he did it in 1990, because he knew that any other option would just simply be unacceptable to the Russians. That's why he did it in that, its declaration of state sovereignty was it will be neutral and that it would never have nuclear weapons. That's why, and we'll talk in a bit about the whole Budapest memorandum. Already in 1990, Ukraine declared that it would never have nuclear weapons.
Is creating the conditions for that to happen. More than that, he's creating the conditions for Putin to achieve much wider foreign policy objectives in Eastern Europe too.
I suppose at the crux of the matter, though, is what is acceptable in Trump's eyes when he's negotiating, because the point has already been made that when he, in his first term, went to see Kim Jong-un in North Korea, everybody was up in arms then, but actually nothing came of it. He could equally just walk away from all of this.
George, can you pause it for a second, please? Again, going back to this as a media project, I would like everyone to consider just for a second here, they could be reversed. He could be asking her these same questions and she would be giving the same answers. Right. Yes. That is what we have right here. We don't have any knowledge. We don't have any expertise here. What we have is a heavily cultivated, curated narrative. It's not what he has to say. It's not what she has to say. It's the message they collectively convey. This is why journalism is turned into fraud.
Well, that's right. But the chilling aspect of it is, I mean, because this is credentialing. His credentialing. He's Lieutenant General. He's a #2 Supreme Allied Commander. So
And he's got that square jaw. I mean,
the
what else
square
do you want?
jaw, and you see the painting in the background. I mean, that's him. Wearing his the army uniform. But you think, this is what NATO is. These are the people who are in NATO. I mean, this is what goes on in their minds. Who was that other guy, Ben Hodges? Now, Ben Hodges, he's a nutcase.
No, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, at one point he was asking the public, and any open source stuff, like stuff on YouTube, you can send me. Remember that?
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. um,
Puffs himself up and says he's the master of the deal. A lot of us will remember the deal he did with the Taliban over the head of the Afghan government in 2020, which set the conditions for the complete collapse of the NATO mission in 2021. And the risk here is that Trump is repeating it, going over the head of the Ukrainian government.
It's a tragedy. The war in Afghanistan is over. Jeez.
Yeah,
Trump even screwed that one up.
That's right. It's very, very funny. Like exactly that point, the collapse of the NATO mission. So we should still be in Afghanistan fighting. I don't know what, fighting the Taliban. So that 10 years down the road or 20 years down the road, the Taliban will win. And for us, no, we got to go on fighting. It's like the books that were written, I remember in the 80s and 90s about Vietnam, and there were still people arguing, like I think Norman Podhoretz arguing, we sold out in Vietnam. So here we are, 1985 or 86. We should still be in Vietnam. Should still be fighting in the
We were never
Southeast
defeated
Asia.
there. We were never defeated in Vietnam.
We were never defeated. Exactly. We should go on fighting the communists. That's it. Go on fighting the Viet Cong.
He has potentially held NATO below the waterline by withdrawing the American guarantee of security support to Europe, the statement that Europe has got to go it alone, which is absolutely right, I have to say. Europe should be going it alone, and Europe should be stepping up to the mark. But the alliance, which is in Europe and the transatlantic region for 70-odd years, just over 70 years, is now under real jeopardy.
What do you see as the future of NATO at the moment?
Look how determined she is.
Well, it's difficult to see because the Americans have effectively...
She's got those Kash Patel eyes.
Yes.
Effectively driven a coach of horses through Article 5, the Article 5 guarantee of an attack on one is an attack on all, if America is not prepared to be a security guarantor for Europe. So we'll have to see. If Europe, the only hope for NATO is if Europe really steps up to the mark in defense terms in a united, comprehensive way. If Europe doesn't do that, the Americans absolutely will have gone. Although I think we're now in a different world, as we were saying before we came on air. I think this is, this week is a different world from last week. Last week was still a world where there was a sense of the Pax Americana.
Yeah.
Now the Pax Americana is firmly finished. And
the Pax Americana, it's very strange. It's like, is this when 1945? I mean, I don't know. What year?
I'm sorry, everybody, but Pax Americana was a term of derision.
Right, derision.
And this is the goal. Okay, I mean it's really extraordinary. This Richard guy, everybody, you know what he is? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy. He's an alcoholic, and if I can just make that decision to go to rehab. I'm on it. I'm on the pinnacle of going into rehab, but not just yet.
Yeah, that's right. So this is. I mean, this goes on for a bit. This interview. So that's just that. Now, just a quick perusal of the British media just today. Today, not the past week. Just today. What we can read is here. And this is the Times of London, and this is an article by Dominic Lawson. Now, Dominic Lawson is a former editor of The Telegraph and former editor of The Spectator magazine. He's a very highly credentialed person. He's the son of Nigel Lawson, who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer under Margaret Thatcher. He resigned. So this is a very highly pedigreed person. And so he's a columnist at the Times now. And he writes, Trump will pander to Xi just as he has to Putin. Republicans who think the US president will fight for Taiwan are deluded. So
Well,
again,
we need to go to fight for Taiwan now. Okay.
that's right. Exactly. That's exactly
oh.
what I thought. Oh, is that on the agenda? That's also on the British agenda that we have to go Taiwan. So we're fighting for Ukraine and we have to fight for Taiwan. I mean, right?
And everyone, the United States agreed to recognize a China One policy, with giving Taiwan a certain foreign trade rights. We wouldn't call it diplomatic or consul, but even below that, meaning Taiwan, you can have contact with the world. We're not cutting that off.
Right.
George, it was Jimmy Carter it was Nixon that started it, but Jimmy Carter had signed off in 1979. That approach has kept the peace.
Right.
Now, the only country that's changing its mind is the United States and its alliance system in the Pacific. It's not broken. Why are you trying to fix it?
But that's the strange thing, because what happened with the Shanghai Communique in 1972? Most of the world, I think pretty much every country in the world, accepts that China is one, that Taiwan is part of sovereign Chinese territory. I mean, everyone, there may be one or two countries out, who have been bought off by Taiwan, but by and large, that's the international consensus. So essentially, when you say fight for Taiwan, you're going to fight against China moving its forces from one part of its sovereign territory to another part of its sovereign territory. That's your goal. That you want to die for that. You want to trigger a world war because China is moving forces from one part of its sovereign territory to another. China isn't even threatening to do that. That's how, basically, I mean, China just, as you said, just leave well alone. Let sleeping dogs lie. I mean, there's no need to upset the apple cart. But this is a fantasy world of some various neocons, and now the British, who have suddenly become obsessed with Taiwan, which never had any connection with Britain. It's not even like Hong Kong. Taiwan never had any connection to Great Britain.
It's a colonial hangover. It's no coincidence that people like Joseph Burrell talk about the garden in the jungle. Okay, that's part of, unfortunately, the DNA of the British establishment, and it seems to go into the next generation after generation after generation, and getting worse because, as George was saying, they were more phlegmatic and those a little bit more finessed.
Right.
Now it's just very vulgar.
That's right. That's right. And then he goes on. It is widely suspected. This is always good. Widely suspected in. Hold on, I missed that. It is widely suspected in Kiev that Moscow, with its long history of election interference in Ukraine, Europe, and the United States, Britain, and elsewhere. This is always very rich when the British start talking about election interference. Now, let me think. Christopher Steele. Why does that name ring a bell?
Well, and the current government in the UK who wanted to send delegations or task force to undermine Trump's campaign efforts.
That's right.
Did those people ever go?
I think they went. I think they went. Yeah. But I don't remember what they actually did. I think they went. And of course, John Major did that before in 1992. He was working for George H.W. Bush against Bill Clinton. Again, they picked the wrong side. I mean, the British invariably picked the losing side to help. Not a good idea, because on the winning side, he's a little pissed off with the British. But
yeah, and Barack Obama actively campaigned against Brexit.
That's right. That's also the losing side.
Also the losing side.
Anyway, they pushed the issue of Ukrainian elections as part of the initial talks with U.S. officials, in part to sow instability.
No, everybody. No. Why is the U.S. doing this? Well, for one reason, maybe Trump doesn't like Zelensky. I think that's pretty obvious, everybody. Right. He doesn't.
Right.
But I think, and I don't have any evidence of this, but logic would dictate, is that the Trump people, given what we know now, everything could change in a week, everybody. So let's not get our knickers tied up in a knot,
Yeah,
okay?
exactly.
But okay, he doesn't like Zelensky and he wants to stick it to him. Yeah, that's kind of, you know, Trump didn't draw first blood here. Okay? He
Right.
didn't draw first blood. But, you know, Zelensky and his Democratic Party backers did. That's a mistake in
Right.
Trump's case.
Right.
Number two, everyone, if there is going to be a deal, and that's a huge, huge if, Trump wants it to stick as much as Putin. Who's going to sign it?
Right.
Who?
Right.
Because the Russians would say, "Look, who is this guy?" I mean, should Barack Obama be signing trade deals
Right.
with Canada?
Right. Right. No,
Okay.
I think that's right, and I think, you know, it's what we were talking about earlier today. You know, this is a mantra: you can't have elections in the middle of a war. Well, you know, they had elections in Iraq. They had several elections in Iraq during the war. They had elections in Afghanistan, several elections, and in South Vietnam, several elections went on. You know, no one said, well, you can't have an election in South Vietnam because there's a war on. I mean, you know, you have an election. On the contrary, the whole point of having an election is to legitimize, hey, we have a democracy. They, the enemy, they don't have a democracy. So the whole idea, this is everyone just repeats this, oh, like, you know, zombie-like, we can't have an election in the middle of a war. Since when? When was that law promulgated?
Interestingly enough, Glenn Greenwald pointed this out. Very smart observation. Public opinion polls within Ukraine, American, European, seem to have no problem doing public opinion
Yes, exactly.
surveys in
That's right.
areas that are not under Russian control. I mean, I don't think it's a big leap to go from polling to
Actual voting.
going to the polls.
Exactly,
Okay?
exactly, and that's why it's so funny when the media report this. Oh, well, he enjoys 57% support. 57% support. I don't know any leader anywhere who enjoys 57% support. If you break 40%, you're doing well. So, but Zelensky apparently is so popular that he got 57%. How the hell did they do this measurement? I mean, no one has any idea. Like, no one knows how much money has been given to Ukraine. No one knows what the casualties are. How many lives have been lost. But apparently, they can spot on declare he has 57% support in Ukraine.
Okay, and who says that? Is it USAID paid? What were the questions? What was the questionnaire?
Exactly.
Okay, if you had a choice between Adolf Hitler and Zelensky, who would you vote for? Okay, I mean, again, Trump said 4%. I don't know. That's closer to 4% than 57%. That's for sure. Okay, but they claim him to be fast and easy with numbers. People that support him are just as fast and easy.
Exactly. Um, and then he goes on. Many Republicans swallow this astonishing debasement of their country's reputation without visibly choking on the grounds that it is necessary to concentrate U.S. firepower on the grounds, the U.S. firepower, God, it's like, on an expansionist communist China, above all to deter it from a move on Taiwan. If so, they will be.
How is China expansionist?
Exactly exactly expansion. How? Yeah, exactly. How is making a move on Taiwan is expansionist? Humiliated.
Creating artificial islands. I guess that's expansionist. I mean, really?
Right. But again, he talks here about Taiwan, above all to deter it from a move on Taiwan. Now, the thing about making a move on Taiwan, if you don't want it to make a move on Taiwan, it's probably not a great idea to pour, I don't know how many arms into Taiwan, because the moment you do that, then the Chinese become very anxious. I mean, if you actually arm Taiwan to the teeth, then the Chinese become very anxious and suspect that this is all part of a plan eventually to push Taiwan to declaring independence. So therefore, you don't want to arouse concerns in Beijing by pouring in arms in Taiwan. And that's why all this talk is actually creating the very crisis that you claim is present now.
I think there's a recent historical precedent, George, for what you're saying.
Right.
After 2014 in
Right.
Ukraine, they
Right.
started pouring arms
Right.
into Ukraine.
Exactly. Exactly. Then you create the very crisis that you claim to be averting. And, so if so, they will be humiliated again by Trump, who, to be fair, is characteristically transparent. During the election campaign, he declared, I want China to do great. I love China. But, Taiwan, they stole our business. He meant microchip production. And Trump attacked the vibrant Chinese democracy because it doesn't pay us for protection. Now, all of this, somebody who says that during a campaign is actually pretty shrewd because he's telling people, yeah, I mean, you hear me saying nasty things about China, but I don't want to go to war with China because I like Xi. And that's what I said. I want China to do great. I love China. That's kind of what you do as a politician when you start, talk belligerently, threatening war with China. People get a little nervous. Where is this going? So when he says that, and then the Taiwan, I think what he says there about Taiwan is rather smarter than what Biden. I don't know how many times Biden declared that he was ready to go to war for Taiwan, something that no previous president had ever declared.
Well, that's what you get when someone is cognitively impaired.
Right.
I mean, but just for the record, everyone, every time Biden, I think there were three major incidents, two for sure, maybe a third one, it was immediately walked back by his people.
But I think it was four times, although his people walked it back, but then he again said it. What was it that time when he called Xi Jinping a dictator? Do you remember?
Right after meeting him.
Right, they called him a dictator, and then those of that sight of Blinken kind of wincing. There was a kind of he was wince. Oh God!
Right. That is only equal to Mike Pompeo sitting across from Angela Merkel, or was Stoltenberg. Well, what about Russian energy? And at one end of the table they're doing this, the other on the American side they're doing this. It was hilarious.
And vibrant Chinese democracy. Well, it's always vibrant. It's always Ukraine's vibrant. As for Xi Jinping, he's a brilliant guy. He controls 1.4 billion people with an iron fist. Trump has been entranced when the Communist Party ended term limits for the presidency, allowing Xi to rule indefinitely. He's now president for life, and look, he was able to do that. I think that's great. Maybe we'll have to give it a shot someday.
No one can do it like Trump.
No one can do it like Trump. And then he has, and then he goes about Elon Musk, and then
no, but see, I'm sorry, everybody, but see, this is the problem with our politics right now, is that people can't understand Trump speak. Okay, I mean, maybe we should give it a shot sometime. Don't you have a sense of humor?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Right. Yeah. That's right. And then then he goes on here, and then given Trump's affection for dictators, it seems odd he used the term as a form of abuse against Zelensky. And what should Ukraine do now if the war is ended without sufficient guarantee against future invasion? Let's recall it was the US, the UK, and indeed Russia that in 1994 offered Ukraine a security guarantee over its existing borders in return for Kiev's very reluctant agreement.
Well, it wasn't security guarantees.
Exactly. We can go through that Budapest memorandum. There are no security guarantees. It's called a memorandum. There are no guarantees.
It's basically, if you have a problem, drop us a line, email best, okay, right. SMS best. Right. You don't necessarily have to call, okay.
Right. It's nothing. It was there was nothing. There was no security. There was nothing there saying, well, if this and this will happen, if anyone threatens your borders, and we'll do this and we'll do that. There was nothing there. It's like an
Well,
empty declaration. Yeah, we support Ukraine's borders within whatever, their territorial integrity. It means nothing. It's like United Nations declarations. I mean, they're just nothing. It's like you make a declaration and that's it. Unless there's actually a formal agreement, a formal plan for what you're going to do in such circumstances, then these are just empty declarations. They're part of international documents. All international documents have these empty declarations.
What he's implying here is that there is some kind of Article 5, which there is.
Right. Of course there isn't.
And
because
I must admit,
go.
I must admit here, in return for Kiev's very reluctant, I don't know how reluctant it was, to be honest with you.
They got some money. There was money.
I mean, they were paid to do this, everybody.
They were paid to do this. And of course, everyone
at least agreement to transfer its Soviet-era nuclear, at least he gets that, okay?
Right.
That's one of the only times in print in the UK I've ever seen this.
Right. It's Soviet-era nuclear weapons. He doesn't quite say, he doesn't say they were actually Russian. They belong to Russia. But what no one says is, well, Belarus and Kazakhstan, this agreement in Budapest applied not just to Ukraine, it applied to Belarus and Kazakhstan. Both Belarus and Kazakhstan, also the nuclear weapons that were on their soil was transferred to Russia, and America coughed up money to help to get this done. That was the whole point of the Budapest memorandum. Americans will pay money to get this done. And then he goes on, after Zelensky met Trump last October, he said he told him, what is the way out? Either Ukraine will have to build nuclear weapons, and then this is defense for us, or we should have some kind of alliance. Trump refused the latter, ruling out any prospect of NATO membership. So what else is Ukraine to do but build its own deterrent?
Everybody, in the waning days of the Biden administration, it was Biden that said that Ukraine is too corrupt to get it in NATO. But that's whitewashed. It's only Trump saying this now. Okay.
Right. That's right. But so what else is Ukraine to do but build its own deterrent? Well, here's the problem. If you do that, you're in violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And that has quite serious consequences. And I don't know to what extent the British people or anyone else is going to want to go on supporting a Ukraine that's in violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaties. That's at the very least. If you start going down this path of we're going to have our own nuclear deterrent, so this is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous talk that Ukraine. Oh well, what else can they do? They're going to develop their own nuclear weapons.
Well, so far there's not one word of diplomacy, not one word of negotiation.
Right. Yeah.
Is there? None.
Yes.
It's only escalate, escalate, escalate.
That's right. So here is the Telegraph. Again, this is just today. I mean, I'm not searching through, what's been going on the past week or 2 weeks. Some guy called Alan Cochrane. Ukraine could be Starmer's Falklands moment. So the Falkland Islands, that was when Margaret Thatcher, dispatched an enormous task force. Britain still used to have a task force in those days. It was 1982, so that's 40 years ago. But they managed to, put together all of its armed forces, bung it onto an aircraft carrier, sail to the South Atlantic to knock out this great, powerful military force known as Argentina. And Britain won. It was an extraordinary victory. Britain defeated Argentina. Essentially pretty much a third world power. But it was a great and famous victory, and it secured Margaret Thatcher re-election the following year in 1983. So here you can see where this is going.
A little trivia pursuit here. The battleship that the British sunk, that was an American battleship that survived Pearl Harbor. And I'm trying to remember the name.
Belgrano. You mean the Belgrano?
Yeah, but it was an American ship, okay?
Yeah.
They acquired it. And the great historical irony is that it survived Pearl Harbor only to be sunk by the British.
Right. Well, that was got nasty because, of course, an awful lot of Argentinians died when they sank that that ship. And clearly the ship was trying to get out of the way.
Yes,
They were moving.
George is absolutely
the
right. It was escaping.
They were trying to escape. And the British sank it. The dictator Galtieri invited a foreign country claiming its territory as his own, invaded a foreign country, and the British PM stood up to him. A British PM stood up to this bunch of islands. There was nothing on those islands, just some sheep, a few sheep farmers. I mean, it was barely populated. I can't remember what the population was, but it was a tiny, tiny population of sheep farmers. Oh, they invaded a foreign country. And then he goes, can the Ukrainian crisis do for Keir Starmer what the Falklands War did for Margaret Thatcher over 40 years ago, and help him escape his domestic travails and win a meaningful role on the world stage? I want a meaningful role on the world stage. Give me meaning and the world stage. She was said to have had a good war in 1982. Can he do the same today? So remember, the parallel is Argentina and Russia. So she defeated Argentina, and the plan is to do to Argentina, to do to Russia what Thatcher did to Argentina. Okay, just as long as we know the parallel. It's not all that daft a question. No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. As the parallels are at times quite eerie. If we substitute General Galtieri, the fascist dictator who ran Argentina and invaded the Falkland Islands by claiming his country owned them, for Vladimir Putin, the vicious autocrat who invaded Ukraine by claiming it was part of Russia, the similarity becomes clear.
Well, that wasn't part of the SMO.
That's right.
That was not the claim.
Right. That wasn't. Yeah. According to opinion polls at the time, Thatcher was the most unpopular prime minister that Britain ever had when, less than 3 years after winning the general election, the Falklands were invaded. Starmer is not far off that record after only 9 months in power.
So going to war to bolster your domestic standing, is this what his thesis is?
It sounds like it. That's the thing about the British. It's like you feel like this person is drunk out of his mind, but he's got to produce a column. The deadline is looming. Hey, I've got to write a column. I don't know what the hell to say. Oh, well, why don't I just draw a parallel between the Falklands and Ukraine, knock something out, Thatcher, and the Starmer, blah, blah, unpopular. She was unpopular, then she became popular. And that's it. And that's your column. I mean, this is almost classic, the worst kind of British journalism. I mean, you've got to knock something off because deadline is looming, but you have no idea what to say. So I'm just going to draw some ridiculous parallel and hope no one notices how ridiculous it is. In Maggie's case, aided and abetted. Notice again, Maggie. I mean, is she a friend of yours? I mean, did you go to school together, calling her Maggie? Aided and abetted by some real warriors in her military and naval entourage, she sent a task force 7,000 miles to the South Atlantic, recaptured the islands, freed the British subjects who lived there and wished to remain British subjects. Her actions cemented once and for all her image that she wasn't a Brit to be trifled.
Oh, okay. So Keir is he's being trifled with. Okay, he needs to be untrifled with.
That's right. I will not be trifled with. And then in a three-pronged note of defiance, before his meeting with Trump on Thursday, Starmer is to outline what's being called a triple whammy against Vladimir Putin. The Minister of Defense is to announce more military aid for Ukraine. The Foreign Office plans more sanctions against Russia. And the Home Office is considering a crackdown on the so-called dirty money of Russian oligarchs.
Boy, that's a brilliant plan. Wow.
I thought
why hadn't they thought about it before?
Exactly. I kind of thought we've done all that. I mean, haven't we taken all this money from the oligarchs? Forced Abramovich to sell Chelsea Football Club. I mean, all these things have been done, and apparently there's still dirty money sloshing around in the city. But now we're getting to the difficult bit for Starmer. It's one thing to disagree with the Donald while you're thousands of miles away on the other side of the Atlantic, entirely another thing to tell him to his face. But for his part, Starmer is winning plaudits at home and abroad for defiantly standing up to Trump then and for visibly and verbally disagreeing with him in public and fully supporting Ukraine, its brave people, its brave president, who's not a dictator, but a democratically elected leader. Now, where is he winning these plaudits? Who, other than from people like you and the sort of the Fleet Street bubble? I mean, we still call it Fleet Street, even though the media are no longer at Fleet Street, but there's the bubble of the media that he's winning plaudits. Where are the polls suggesting that the British people want to go to war with Russia over Ukraine? I mean, I haven't seen that poll. And its determination not to be excluded from the decisions about its future. British leaders have too often avoided arguments with US presidents for fear of endangering the supposed special relationship, but it is Trump who appears keen to cast it aside, while Starmer appears to argue for its continuance, but not at any price. But the problem is that, I mean, the Trump is going to say, well, if you want to go to Ukraine and put your troops in Ukraine, then do it. No one's going to stop Britain from sending its troops to Ukraine. The drawback to that plan is that the Russians have said no, no British forces in Ukraine, and the Americans have said we're not going to support you. That's the fly in the ointment. You've got Russia and America both are rejecting the plan. But if Starmer wants to send British troops to Ukraine, go right ahead. No one's stopping you. And then here, his aim this week should be to encourage Trump to help Ukraine avoid Putin's blood-soaked embrace. A tall order, perhaps, but one well worth the effort. So, again, why do you need Trump for this? I mean, just go ahead and do it. I mean, no one is stopping Britain from going ahead, sending its forces into Ukraine, and then, the consequences be damned.
Yeah, you will be damned.
Yes.
Yes,
that's
you
right.
will be.
That's right. And then
and George is right. Maybe, I don't live in the UK, but I mean, clearly the British public is being polled on this, right? Obviously, George, do you want to go to war with Russia? Donald Trump wants to wind this thing down. Do you want to accelerate it? Yes or no? Another easy question.
I think so. Exactly. Donald, you asked that question. Donald Trump wants to end this war. Do you support it, or do you think that the war should continue? I don't know. I get the feeling that there isn't going to be a huge groundswell of support. Yeah, we want to continue, particularly if it means deploying British troops in Ukraine. I just don't. I don't see that there's going to be a great deal of support for this. Anyway, here's another article. This is in the Telegraph. All children. Why Britain could offer Europe its nuclear deterrent. Oh,
this is insanity.
Nuclear deterrent. That's good. Labour has the chance to stand with the continent while taking Trump's security concerns seriously. So we're going to have the nuclear deterrent. Germany's chancellor in waiting has asked for the protections of Britain's nuclear deterrent if Donald Trump withdraws US security guarantees for Europe. Friedrich Merz said Germany needed to prepare in case the president ditched NATO promises to defend his allies. The center-right Christian Democratic Union leader said he wanted Europe to have its own nuclear umbrella, or at the very least be able to shelter behind Britain and France's weapons. One thing that needs to be made very clear, Britain does not have an independent nuclear deterrent. Britain's Trident program is controlled by the Americans. Britain cannot use nuclear weapons without the Americans signing off on it. France does have an independent deterrent. Britain does not. So all the talk about, Britain's deterrent, Britain doesn't have that independent deterrent. It cannot use nuclear weapons without the Americans signing off on it. So that it's untrue that Britain has an independent nuclear deterrent.
But who wants to continuously escalate?
Right.
This is absurd. This is absurd.
Right.
I mean, you want to have a nuclear war in Europe over Ukraine.
Over Ukraine.
Everybody before February 2022, Ukraine was not a security concern for Europe
No.
at all.
Well, that's exactly that's
At all.
Yeah. And
As a matter of fact, if you look at the European press, they were highly critical of Azov and these Kraken and all these other groups. Okay. The human rights reports out of Europe were warning of the rise of the right wing. And, this is absurd. I mean, they just whitewash all of this.
You're right. And this is
and particularly since, and George and I have discussed this at great length. My suspicion is the letter to NATO of December 15th was basically how Russia saw the security architecture of Europe. That's basically their position to this day. Okay, and it was to avoid having something like this happen.
Right, but this is the point. When was this ever a vital security concern of Britain or France or Germany or anything? Because this, you got to tell us at what point did this become your vital security concern? Again, Britain was able to live with Soviet forces in Berlin. Britain was able to live with the Soviet forces in Hungary. Britain was able to live with Soviet forces in Czechoslovakia. So at that time, this was not a vital security concern. When did Ukraine, which is not a member of NATO, which has not been offered a membership of NATO, when did that become this vital security concern that you're talking here about using nuclear weapons? Because, and this is the thing, that none of these people ever explain, other than Hitler. But but they don't tell us, well, when did this become a security, and why is this a major British security concern? What happens in Ukraine?
Well, I don't think that the author of this article is contemplating that. So this sounds like even though they don't have independent control, the British should preemptively use nuclear weapons.
It sounds like it, yeah.
So the Russians won't react?
That's kind of, I mean, you always think that there's a subtext here, which is, well, the Americans are going to save us. I mean, the Americans are going to bail us out. Because if you start with that, and the Americans have said, well, you're kind of on your own, and we didn't really plan on this, then you're facing Russia, by yourself. That's not a good situation to be in. I mean, it's just so the British plan here is obviously to get the Americans involved. I mean, all this talk, Starmer this, and we're going to do the Europeans. Ultimately, the plan is to get the Americans in and then hide behind the American. The problem that I have, which is what makes me a little nervous, is when you've got lunatics running around with dangerous weapons in their hands, there's always a chance, maybe it's a small chance, 1 chance in 10 or whatever, that they're going to do something really, really stupid. And the British seem to have just simply lost the plot. They've gone off their heads. Macron, to a certain extent, also seems to have gone off his head. Oddly enough, even the Poles seem to be fairly sober at the moment. They've said, we're not sending any troops into Ukraine. But the British, the Balts, and I don't know, the Danes and the French, they seem to have just gone off their heads. And so, but that's why I think it's extraordinary, this lunacy that's prevailing at the moment.
Well, you would think that after everything that's been said and done, logic, even morality would say, well, if the Americans have given up on this, then, well, okay, we did our best. I mean, that would be smart.
Right. Yes.
Okay. And, why don't you just have, to use a historical phrase, have a good treaty with Russia, have a good treaty with the Russians. Okay.
Right.
We never have that option.
No,
That is extraordinary, George. It's
no, that's it.
extraordinary. I mean, even during the Cold War,
No, no,
the whole
it's
debate
very
about
much
house
during the Cold
politics,
War.
should you be engaging? Is
Right,
it a good idea? What are the,
right, 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 right,
aren't
right.
we selling out to
Right,
Washington by
right.
dealing, I mean, I remember
No,
it.
that's right. That's right. And even, that throughout the Cold War, one leader after another would go, and be, yeah, it's important we maintain peace in Europe. The most important thing is peace in Europe. We have to avoid a war. And, we don't necessarily like the Soviet Union. We don't like the Soviet leadership, but the most important thing is peace. And then the US president has undermined NATO's Article 5, which states an attack on one alliance member is an attack on all, after suggesting to Putin that he would abandon any ally not spending enough on defense. Now, he didn't suggest this to Putin. He said
He
this.
didn't suggest this to Putin at all. This is
He said
absurd.
this in a speech. I mean, he said this in one speech after another during the campaign. When he said, when one of his member states said, when I asked them, when he said, when he asked me, would America come to his defense? And I said, are you fully paid up? And he told me he's not fully paid up. And I said, no, we're not coming to your defense. I mean, that was Trump said this openly. He didn't say this to Putin. He said this openly. Now, that's his style of talking. Are you fully paid up? It's like, have you paid your rent? But if you haven't paid your rent, then sorry, you're out of here. I mean, that's his attitude. He didn't say this to Putin.
And look, first of all, he didn't suggest it to Putin. What he did was he warned NATO.
He won NATO. He said to everyone, yeah, you gotta pay your dues, or in other words, you gotta, now back then it was 2%. And the point is that the NATO member states, they're not, most of them they can't pay the 2%. They don't, even Germany, after all the talk, the Titan vendor of Scholz, they're still barely above 2%. And I'm sure they haven't really met 2%. They're just
Well, and
fiddling around with the numbers.
Angela Merkel used to play the card. Oh, but we helped subsidize the NATO operation in Afghanistan. That counts to our 2%. I mean, she's kind of clever that way. We do this and this and this. That's 2%.
And Sir Keir Starmer has joined the Europeans in criticizing Mr. Trump for calling Mr. Zelensky a dictator. For his trouble, the US president accused him of doing nothing to end the war in Ukraine. That's exactly accurate. That's a perfectly accurate statement. You have done nothing to end the war. Yeah. No, on the contrary, you have done everything to escalate the war. I don't think Starmer has any grounds for complaint. That's a perfectly accurate. You have done nothing to end the war. Sir Keir will soon announce a new package of military aid for Ukraine and sanctions on Russia in a veiled rebuke to Washington.
Great. Hold my beer. Okay, that's great. Right. No, good for you. Good for you. Okay. Right.
In an olive branch to Mr. Trump, the prime minister is expected to set the date of 2030 for British defense spending to hit 2.5% of GDP.
Wow, what a bold proposal, George. What bold. That's bold. That's thinking out of the box. That's bold.
But I love this. You're going to go into the Oval Office. Well, I've got this plan to step it up to 2.5% of GDP. Oh, when's that going to happen? In 2030. By the time, Trump will no longer be president, Starmer will no longer be prime minister. That's when it's going to hit 2.5%. I thought we all agreed on 5%. Wasn't that the plan? Trump will say,
Mike, you know the prime minister. I said 5, right?
Yeah,
I said 5.
I'm pretty sure I said 5%. Yeah,
I'm sure I said 5. Keir Starmer, I have some suggestions for you. You don't need to take your coat off. Okay, it's going to be a really short meeting.
I think it's going. I think so. I think so. I mean, I remember Trump's his first meeting with Theresa May. Can hardly even remember her, Theresa May. That was a frosty meeting. They didn't hit it off. I don't think they're going to. Yeah.
There's a buzz on Twitter. Trump wanted to talk to the Polish President Duda, and he made him wait like an hour and a half, and then the conversation was like less than 10 minutes, and the Poles were, it's an insult, it's an outrage. We want to name Fort Trump after Trump. I'm pretty sure the call was lined up, and they told Trump, you got to get this call right before. I know your diet. Your diet Pepsi's getting warm, but can you just real quick? Well, why am I talking to him? This is this. All right, take the call.
Right.
And I'm sure Trump is saying, "Who's this? Who am I talking to?"
But it's also very strange because Duda will stop being president really in a few months. So I don't even know why he showed up there. Maybe he wants a job. Some one of these America First institutions, some think tank will get him some kind of a gig. But I mean, there's no point for Trump to meet him because he's not going to be president for more than a few months.
It was a meeting or a phone call. Maybe I got it wrong.
He was there. He was at the CPAC.
He was there. Okay, thanks.
He was actually there. Yeah.
Oh, doubly so. I mean, he didn't even ask him, do you want to join me for lunch or nothing.
There are benefits to Britain offering Germany and Europe the shield of Trident.
I can't think of one.
I can't think of one. Again, it's not in your power to do so. Britain could prove to Washington that it is listening to the president's demands that Europeans take responsibility for their own security.
Well, that's a very interesting paragraph sentence. Britain could prove to Washington that it is listening. No, you have proven that you're deaf.
Yes.
You people are deaf.
Right.
That's why his patience has come to an end. Right. Everybody, even before he became president the first time, Trump was pouring cold water on NATO. It's not like something that just popped in his head. Many things pop into his head. Okay, yeah. Not this thing.
Right. That's right. And that's and again, I could have perused other newspapers, and I could find this sort of loony stuff. But anyway, Starmer will be in Washington this week. Macron, I think, will be there tomorrow, which is, I guess tomorrow they're going to have the G7 meeting. So maybe they're going to take this. It's a virtual meeting, a virtual G7. So maybe Trump and Macron will be on the same. They'll be sitting at the same computer station.
It'll be good to see a hostage video with Trump.
So,
everybody, the horse is bolted from the barn. I mean, this is just wasting time because Trump, for better or worse, and George and I are obviously hoping for the better, that this is going to be a cornerstone of Trump's final term in office. Okay, he's not going to let these lackeys get in his way.
Right.
No, he is not interested in listening to anything they have to say.
Right, that's right. Exactly. But it's gonna, I mean, we've talked about it. We don't have time now to go into them. But obviously, there are many aspects to this, and we have no idea whether it'll be successful. Obviously, we both hope that this is the beginning of the end of NATO. But there's huge institutional barriers to bringing about that result. So, but it's very nice when you have an American president, and I don't know whether you saw this clip, and I think it was yesterday. Trump was giving a news conference. I think it was in the Oval Office, and then some reporter asked. The German election coming up on Sunday. What do you think the outcome of that will be? And Trump said, "What election on Sunday? Oh, election in Germany on Sunday. Election in Germany. Well, good luck to them. Look, we've got our own problems. Goodbye." Just what election in Germany? Look, we got our own problems. I mean, what are you telling me about Germany and Germany? I don't think on my mind.
Everybody. Well, we'll get to make a separate video on this, but it's a parting comment here. All of this is irrelevant now. So there's going to be a new chancellor. All right, we won't be able to mock Sergeant Schultz anymore. A real pity for us.
Right.
But what difference is it going to make?
Right.
What difference?
Right. Well, we'll talk about this in our next video.
All right, everybody. We're doing our a mega Sunday wrap. I'm feeling much better. I think this is doing these podcasts is therapeutic. I mean it, honestly. We're finishing up. We'll get one more on Sunday. We're going to reconvene for our live stream tomorrow at 10 o'clock Eastern time. And then George is in the bullpen for Tuesday.
Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time, and these dogs are getting very, very angry. They're really, their mood is darkening. And when these dogs' moods darken, then bad things happen. So the tip jar, it needs to be taken care of. Otherwise the dogs.
I'll show you what happens when you don't fill the tip jar. Look, what? Buddy takes a single sock and holds it hostage.
That's it.
He holds it. He thought he ran away. He got caught. He was doing this as I'm signing off.
Yeah.
He grabs the sock. He's going to hide it. Okay, I'll give you the sock. Fill up the chip jar. I have not imparted this truth to people before.
Yeah, that's right. But the message is, this is what I can do to a sock. Imagine what I can do to a human throat. And so it's a chilling message.
Just notice? I'm using a new computer here. This thing it's light sensitive. Do you mind when I moved away, then it lit up, and now I sit back and it goes back, kind of medieval looking, kind of sinister looking.
This is it's magnificent. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye-bye.